welcome back, guys. So far, what have we done in this course? We have looked at the biological basis of human behavior. We have studied how the interactions of molecules work in the human brain. We have learned about neuroscience. We have even now talked about a lot of the implications of neuroscience. But in fact, throughout history, there has been a field that is devoted to the study of human behavior, and that is the field of psychology. Okay? And so I am going to be giving you guys a great introduction to psychology with the assistance of MIT OpenCourseWare, with the assistance of Hank Green, who has an entire section on psychology too. And I've looked at the different explanations that he has and really picked out the best ones that I feel are most relevant to this course, that are addressing the big issues and the big implications that we're talking about of human behavior, of the functioning of the human mind here. So I don't want to go into exactly the nitty-gritty information that you're going to be learning. And I want to remind you of something overall in this course that I want you guys to take away. I want us to really think about the forest and not the trees. This is an expression. This is an expression that says, let's think about the big picture of what we're studying. Let's not worry about nitty-gritty details. It's not a huge deal to me whether or not you remember that acetylcholine is the main neurotransmitter that's involved in muscle contraction. What I care about more is that you know that there is a signal from the brain that is telling your muscle to move. Okay, so with that example, let's talk about the large contributions that psychology has made to the field, studying the mind, and let's take some of the more important. Let's talk about one experiment specifically in psychology that really shows a very delicate and intricate the delicate and intricate nature of the human psyche, of how we react in certain situations. Jack, this experiment is called the Milgram experiment. Right. Okay. So, Jack, you told me you've taken some psychology courses. Mm-hmm. You've had a little bit of experience in psychology. So let's review a little bit about just the very basics of what happened in this experiment. Mm-hmm. This experiment was conducted a long time ago, in the 50s, and what occurred during this experiment was people were asked to come into a laboratory setting. There were some very official people of authority, mm-hmm. Okay, and they were asking a certain subject to do a certain task, okay? And if the subject got the task wrong, okay, they were asked to punish the subject. And they were able to punish the subject with a series of switches that delivered electrical shocks. Right. Now, those shocks were not real, okay? They were pretend shocks, and the subject was actually an actor. Okay, but what this revealed about humanity was that when someone with authority says, this is okay to do something, this is what you should be doing, people do it. And a high percentage of people listened to the person of authority who said, deliver the shock, you must deliver the shock. So Jack, what is your understanding of the Milgram experiment and what happened?
Well, you covered the basics pretty good there. I remember a few extra details there, however. Interestingly enough, the point at which the shocks got to a deathly voltage, like very dangerous, they would keep going even despite. Right. In fact, there are some little anecdotes from there where people would burst into tears and they still would push the button because they're, oh, it's okay, it's part of the experiment. Just go ahead, push the button. Right. And so it's like you have to wonder why exactly people were doing this. And if you really, you can't, it's really hard to think about it in an objective standpoint, but because there's people's lives at stake, potentially, within the experiment. So, why people are continuing to shock others, or shock them.
And Jack, they even went so far as when the person went unconscious.
They kept going.
Inside, the person in the lab coat, the quote expert, the quote authority said, do this.
Exactly, and it's like the reason why is because the responsibility, having that authority. There's multiple factors, but part of it is having that responsibility weighted, lifted off their shoulders. It's like to them, they're like, well, if something does go wrong, I've been told to do this, so it's not me. It's not me who's doing it. It's this guy. And so it's like
The blame has been
precisely.
shifted.
Blame has been shifted. And so, if you look about through various history, even like the best example might be during World War II, the Nazi Party of Germany, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those were just normal men, those like you and me, of course, from the 40s, but living their lives. They obviously not everyone adhered to the principles of the Nazi Party. But yet here they were fighting the battles, enforcing the laws. And so it's very related to this because it's like, well, here's a prime example of a group of people who not necessarily are doing what they want to be or what they believe in, but there's an authority figure saying, this is right, this is what you need to do it. And so no one specifically is saying, well, I'll take the blame for you, but it's like, how else would you rationalize that to yourself?
And we have to ask ourselves, does this take, we're going to talk about stress a lot, does this take the stress of the situation a little bit away from this person? Because a lot of that's like what that's how we act in lives. If something is not detrimental to us, if it's not producing the type of neurochemistry that is involved with stress that like we're going to talk about soon, is it easier for us to do it? Is this what's happening in the brain in this area? And this is obviously a very unethical experiment
A little
to do
bit
now.
there, yes.
And in what ways? Why wouldn't we conduct an experiment like this today?
Nowadays,
Why would this be illegal to conduct?
Because if you look at the participants in the study, a lot of them were committing acts that in everyday life they wouldn't, obviously. And so it's like from that, they got to see a whole new side of themselves, really.
Right.
And depending upon the person, they may not be able to deal with that very well.
Yeah, how does that make... We have to think about when we study. This is what is interesting about psychology. When we study the human organism, how are we affecting that human being as a person? How does that person feel that they got pushed by an authority figure, but got pushed to perform something they would never do?
Some of them even believe they're actually killing somebody.
Right.
It's like, that's extreme limit.
So
but
again, I want you guys to talk about the ethics of this experiment. I want you guys to talk about the implications of this experiment. Now, you're going to be learning, there are many branches of mainstream psychology. We look at development, there's development psychology, there's looking at how a human being is developing at certain ages, and what type of milestones we're looking for in those areas. We look at personality psychology. We look at, how you and I have different personality tests. And, I will say about just personality in general, I really was not able, when I studied psychology and neuroscience at UC Santa Cruz, and when I looked at the different personality tests that are out there, I was very, very skeptical. And then I took one, and I read it, and I said, this really helps me understand myself a little bit, in ways that I didn't necessarily expect. Have you taken a personality
I
test
have
before?
occasionally, whether they be actual or those online ones, but
Right.
it is interesting to know. But there is actually kind of a relief in that, because if you think about all the various theories on personality, I mean, for Christ's sake, there's entire courses dedicated to it.
Right.
Somewhere there in the truth lies,
Right.
So it's like the more tests you probably take, the better, actually. It's
I
like
don't
being able
know
to
if
get
I agree with that.
Maybe. I mean, if you somewhere in there you're gonna hit it, but maybe not. But getting an idea of yourself is interesting.
There's different factors we look at. Introversion versus extroversion. We look at, one's ability to feel versus one's ability to think. Whether we are in these different categories, whether we use our intuition or not. these are different categories that psychologists have to push things in. And I want to make a mention. Okay, let's just take a step back here. So we have developmental psychology, we have personality psychology, we have cognitive psychology, where we're again looking at our perceptions of how how our mind is perceiving the world, how different, how our brain really is influencing our behavior and certain aspects that we do that you would not necessarily expect, the basis of optical illusions. Now, I will say that I think I want you guys to, I want to just cut it because I lost my train of thought.
Okay, I'm just going to let it roll though, because I want it in the same sequence.
Okay. Oh, I was going to say something really cool.
Take your time.
Okay, you got it.
Okay, you know the drill. Be looking at Jack. Whenever you're ready.
So I want you guys to really discuss in the forum conversation questions about once you watch the MIT OpenCourseWare on psychology, on development, on the different aspects that he covers. Okay, and it's just a snippet. Once you watch Hank Green's explanation of mainstream psychology, what is this discipline doing really well, in your opinion? What is it not doing really well? I would give you my own opinion that psychologists, I would call myself a psychologist in many ways, as it is something that I studied, is we really want to be scientists in a lot of ways. And the problem we encounter is that quantifying human behavior in the way that we are able to quantify the amount of liquid in a flask is quite different.
Just a little bit.
And we just want, as psychologists, a lot of time we want so bad to be part of the club of scientists that are able to give really hard data and able to make very accurate predictions. And again, we have a problem that we arrive at this roadblock, that we can't always do that. And why do we arrive at that roadblock? We arrive there because there is a hyper-complexity of human behavior. There are a million plus, more like an infinite amount of ways in which you could perform a task. Whereas measuring the amount of liquid in a flask, plating a bunch of E. coli cells, and watching how they grow, it's more predictable. Okay.
Exactly. I mean, with psychology, you could have outward behavior. Who knows what the cause of that is? Whereas if you have a chemical reaction, you can say, oh, well, I have these two constituents, and this, and that. It's very, it's quantitative versus qualitative. Very simply put, measurable versus unmeasurable.
So that's what I want you guys to answer in the forum conversation questions. I want you to also watch Alison Gopnik's TED Talk on. She is what I would consider, a mainstream psychologist at the University of California, Berkeley, and she's studying how babies think. And I want you guys. I don't need to explain this TED Talk to you guys. I want you guys to talk about it in the forum conversation questions. I want to take this TED Talk and not make huge comments on it to influence you guys. I want you to develop your own original ideas about it and discuss it. And when the time comes, if you have questions about it or if you have questions about anything else, I can be there to answer. So let's see. Continue working on your creative project. Okay. Continue with thinking about how this course is adding up. How are the beginnings of this course allowing you to possibly understand the later material? Again, I think I've said this a few times now. Let's remember that we are now looking at more subjective material. Like Jack and I were just discussing, it's very hard to quantify human behavior. And sometimes it's difficult to be extremely scientific about it. You have to use your intuition. You have to extrapolate. You have to even be a little bit more human about how we study these things. So answer in the form conversation questions like, how do we study human behavior? What is the best way for us to understand understand why people are doing the things that we do? So with that, I'm going to end it, and have a really good week, guys.